Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of History Buff 41. Today we are doing a book review on Bruce Canfield's new book, the U.S. Model 1917 Rifle, America's Enfield. So this book takes a look at if you can't tell by the title, the Model 1917 rifle. It was initially designed by the British as a replacement to their short magazine Lee Enfield. It was supposed to be simpler and a little less expensive to manufacture, and a lot of research went into it. And around 1913, they were looking at an alternative caliber of .276, but a little something called World War I got in the way, and so they eventually decided to maintain the .303 caliber that they had. But the only problem was that all of their small arms manufacturers were busy making Lee Enfields for King and Country and the Empire, and nobody could switch over. And of course, they massively had to mobilize to meet the demands of the First World War, and none of their domestic manufacturing was capable of switching over to manufacture this new rifle. So what they ended up doing was going across the pond to the United States, and they set up a contract for manufacturing with Winchester, with Remington, and with a newly created company specifically to manufacture these called Eddystone to make the pattern 1914 rifle. And for those of you who don't know, Bruce Canfield is one of the top firearms researchers in the United States. He has written a number of books related to World War I and World War II era firearms, specifically U.S. rifles. He has written, his last two books were great big 800-page tomes on the M1 rifle, and the other one is called, I believe, the M1 Grand, and the other one, his most recent book prior to this, was a book called U.S. Infantry Weapons of the Second World War, where he looked at everything from knives and bayonets to machine guns, mortars, and flamethrowers. But if you find one of Mr. Canfield's books, definitely buy it, because they are worth their weight in gold. So let's take a look into this one. And as you can see, we start off here with the British development and manufacture of the 1917. We see several prototypes. And we see, the British bayonet, very similar to what would later become 1917 bayonet, only a couple of minor alterations between those. We take a look at the markings over here, various markings and differences in sights and requirements as required by the British government. And you see here the development of it. We'll move on a little bit further, and you see period drawings and photographs, as well as modern photographs of different parts of the firearm. It's broken down, and each part here he describes how it operates and how it's designed. And then if we go a little further into the book, he takes a look at each one of the manufacturers. Again, it was Winchester, Remington, and Eddystone. And so he does a pretty deep dive into each one of them. Then if we get a little bit further into the book, he talks about their use in World War I. And the U.S. changeover, I shouldn't say changeover, but the U.S. deciding to adopt and use what the Model 1914 and adopt it to from the British .303 to the American .30 caliber, more commonly known as .30-06 round, and the manufacturing challenges that were faced there. The U.S. Ordnance Department had a higher interchangeability threshold than the British ordnance people did, and so there were some challenges with getting this changeover made and the interchangeability to the U.S. Army's likings. And actually, during World War I, the 1903 Springfield was the primary, the main adopted weapon. It was obviously adopted by the U.S. military in 1903, but the 1917, there were, I believe, about twice as many. They accounted for about 2/3 of the rifles issued to American troops during World War I. After World War I, the decision was made to stay with the 1903 Springfield, and a lot of the 1917s were mothballed. put into storage. They were also given out to various police departments and that sort of thing. And that's all discussed here in the World War I chapter. And then they have a chapter for between the two wars where they're working on preservation and packing the rifles away and issues that were involved with that. Another little thing comes along called World War II, and he gets into that. By this time, the United States is moving away from the 1903 Springfield and into the M1 Garand. However, there are several hundred thousand, if not several million, a little over a million of these sitting in storage, these 1917s. And so they were given out to a bunch of allies. A lot of them went to the UK as aid, and those that went to the UK, you know, they had a different caliber than the 303, and so you'll see them, if you can run across one, you'll see red paint across the muzzle, end of the muzzle here, and it'll be a lot of times written in marker 30-06. These were issued largely to Home Guard units, and that freed up other more standardized British military firearms for frontline troops. And the United States still used in World War II the 1917 quite a bit. You know, I know of a fellow who was on an artillery gun, a crewman on an artillery gun, and they were issued 1917s. And there's other period photographs in here of Allied troops and of American troops using 1917s into World War II. But World War II is pretty much the end of the use, and there's, you know, listings in here too. Some of these guns, they did not fare well in storage, and so he goes through, like right here, high standard. They made replacement barrels. A lot of the guns that were put into storage were not stored properly and were not cleaned properly, and the corrosive ammunition used in World War I and World War II by the military had ruined the barrels, and so they needed replacements. And so you see here Rock Island Armory in Rock Island, Illinois. They made a lot of replacement barrels, as did High Standard, as did the Johnson Arms Company, famously known for the Johnson repeating rifle and the Johnson machine gun, owned and operated by Melvin Maynard Johnson. Bruce Canfield has a book on the Johnson firearms and on Johnson himself that I would definitely encourage you to purchase and read, or find and read. And again, we see here arsenal rebuild stamps from World War II, and some more markings here on the bolt. Here's a proof marking. Just a lot of good information for collectors in there. If we go on a little bit further, we see some variations. This was a trench version of it, developed for World War I, where troops could fire the rifle from undercover and still be able to see the enemy. There was, you know, there's a sniper variant of it. There was a Pedersen device variant, but I don't know that more than, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 prototypes were ever made for it. So then we can move on here. There were a lot about accessories. The bayonet, again, very, very similar to the pattern 1914 that was used by the British. The United States made a change here with the scabbard. You can see in World War I to fit with the Model 1910 hanger on it to fit with our webbing system. And you can see these are made by Winchester and Remington, the bayonets. You see there's a little, what they call a clean out hole that separates the American one. You don't see that on the British, the pattern 13 bayonets. And then they were used again, not only on the 1917 rifle, but also on the trench guns. And again in World War II, the scabbards were replaced with something a little more similar to the M7 or the M10 scabbard for the M1 rifle. You also see here, you know, adapters in that to be able to shoot rifle grenades, World War I and World War II era rifle grenades. You see slings, talks about the various slings, the curve string, the 1923, the 1907, talks about cleaning kits, covers for the action, and just so on and so forth. Here's an armorer's kit with all or most of the accessories anyway. Targeting, target practice stuff, you know, just different things in here. And then toward the end of the book, he gives collecting tips and recommendations for things that collectors would want to look for and should stand out and should consider when purchasing the rifle. And then as we move here further toward the back, there's an appendix that shows a number of arsenal rebuilds, World War II and post-war for the 1917, as well as a few that haven't been identified. And if we go back a little bit further, we see a number of research tables basically showing various, I don't know what you want to say, serial numbers for the rifle for the 1917, experimental models, or maybe where rifles were sent over for foreign aid, either through Lend-Lease or through the post-war, Cold War mutual aid sort of thing, and ones that were sent off to National Guard units and local shooting clubs, and through the civilian marksmanship program and that sort of thing. So again, another great publication, another great book from Bruce Canfield. And again, here toward the back, these are some of his latest, some other books that he has that are currently in print. Again, the M1 Garand Combat Shotguns, another great book on trench guns from World War I up until modern day, and another great book on the 03 Springfield. So pretty much if you come across one of his books, the later hard-covered ones, they're going to be excellent. They're going to have a lot of great information. They're very well written. Just can't say enough about them. So would definitely encourage you, if you have an interest in the 1917 rifle, this is probably one of the best ones out there. There's a couple others out there that are also pretty good. One of them by C.S. Ferris, and the other one, I forget the guy's name, but it is published by a group called For Collectors Only. Ian Skinnerton, who's like the Bruce Canfield of British rifles, he had written one probably 40 years ago called American Enfield. I haven't read that, but it was a great one as well. But this is probably the best one out there. The other two are great, and honestly, yeah. So this is at $49, $50 a pop. You're not going to break the bank on this. There's definitely other books out there that are a lot more expensive on other firearms, but this is definitely well within just about anybody's price range if you're looking at collecting these and wanting some more information. So with that, I want to say to all of you, thank you for watching. If you like what I'm doing here, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And you know what? We've got a comment section here at the bottom. If you like what we're doing or have some questions, definitely leave some comments at the bottom. Thanks for watching.